You guys had members of the roster at Notre Dame from Louisiana. Obviously, you've paid attention to this state as far as recruits go. Now that Louisiana is your backyard, how do you view the state in it being your primary recruiting ground?
Well, it's been a little while for me since I've been at a place that didn't recruit nationally. So it's refreshing to know you come into a recruiting process saying, okay, we've got a home base and it's really, really strong. That's exciting. It's exciting to start every recruiting conversation with home state first, then we'll go out from there. I probably did not understand the width and the depth of the talent in the state. The reality of it is there are guys that right now are ranked 3-star players in the state of Louisiana that when we look up in 8 months are going to be ranked much higher and are capable of winning high-level football in the SEC. They're just, for whatever reason, have not been seen, have not been out on the camp circuit yet. It's amazing to me, and they're everywhere. There are players in the metropolitan areas, starting with New Orleans, obviously, and then you talk about Lafayette and places like that. And then as I did some traveling in January, I'm up in places like northern Louisiana where you wouldn't consider it major metropolitan or urban areas, and there are great. You're driving 45 minutes between schools. And there are great players in these small little communities. So that's exciting for me. And then, obviously we're going to consider Houston part of Louisiana. To us, that is home base. And frankly, I look at East Texas the same way. I think they're just, there's certain areas that might be considered out of state on a map, but as we look at them, they are home base. And the amount of players within, like I said, that 400-mile radius of this campus is exciting.
Brian, was there a challenge or is there a challenge when you look at the league of joining the SEC?
Sure. It's highly competitive in everything that we do. Yeah. It's highly competitive in recruiting. It's highly competitive in facilities. It's highly competitive in everything that we do. I was asked, what's one thing that you've experienced that you're probably not used to? I'll be very honest with you. In 25 years of coaching, I've never been in a league where head coaches in the league will take shots at each other via social media.
Right.
Like,
it's certainly given.
It's like,
right.
It's like, really? But but we're prepared for that. I mean,
Sure.
Look, I was at A&M for a year, the first year we were in the SEC, so there was some indoctrination there. And then, obviously, when you're at a place like Notre Dame, we beat the SEC on Kyle Hamilton. We were recruiting against SEC schools for certain players, not the entire roster. I understand that, but we were involved in those battles. So, we had a sense of what this was going to be, but look, we're not shying away from it either. I mean, we're fully prepared to compete against everybody and anybody. And that starts with closing down our borders. We've got to do a great job of keeping the best players in state. Now, the best players in state, they got to want LSU and they got to accept the challenge and they got to accept the accountability and the standards that we're going to set within our program. But we're gonna battle our tail off for every guy in the state.
There was a lot of upset Louisianians when Jerry Tillery ended up in South Bend and then wear purple and gold, and now he is a standout with the Los Angeles Chargers after developing at Notre Dame under Brian Kelly. Coach, the transfer portal, you guys had tremendous success. You mentioned the 15, 14 players that you signed, whether it was Will Campbell or Emory Jones or Quincy Wiggins or Walker Howard or even Harold Perkins. You guys got quality players in all of those guys it felt like you signed. And then you did the same thing in the transfer portal. How has that changed the way that you approach recruiting, and then the challenge of jumping in there and having so much success like you guys did in very early days on the job?
You know what? I appreciate you bringing up. You know, you got to forgive me. It's hard still. Everything feels like it happened just yesterday. But Emory, you know, that Harold Perkins signing at the end was a really big deal. That was a big boost for our program. And I think, you know, when we got here and the staff turnover occurred, there were a lot of people around us saying, "You'll never get this guy now." Yep. I mean, he was too tight with members of the old staff, which is understandable. I mean, that's the nature of what we do. But there was some great work done within our program with Harold and his family and Emory, and you could go on and on. So I apologize to those guys. So
it was very much a compliment to you and your group in the ground y'all made up in a short time, because that was the feeling that the odds were against you all in getting players like that, and for y'all to close like that, I think was very reassuring for at least the fan base. Yeah.
And look, that was a big one in the office. Like we're not afraid to say that.
Yeah.
Like that was a big deal. Transfer portal. So it was obvious that the roster was in a difficult state when we arrived. Coach and I had long conversations about it, and he was very clear about this is how we're going to go about this. That there are certain. The first thing we did was evaluate the roster and decide, okay, we need immediate help here. We can add a player here, but we feel like we've got frontline players. We're adding depth at certain positions. We're looking for starters at other positions. So the first thing that we did was sit down together, evaluate the roster, and decide where the most immediate needs were.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was a daily grind of who is entering the portal, where is this person in their academic tenure, how many years of eligibility remaining, what kind of player are we dealing with here, what kind of person are we dealing with here, and then lastly, does this person have ties to Louisiana? Is this a player that, dreamt of coming to LSU and for whatever reason 2 or 3 years ago the opportunity didn't exist, so now there might be, some immediate recognition or interest. All those factors were coming into play. We had to be really responsible. We could not build a top-heavy roster. We couldn't take, 15 guys that had 1 year of eligibility remaining. That would have been irresponsible and would have put us in a position where a year from now we'd sign 32 guys and not be at 85, and we couldn't do that. So it was a process. There were so many people involved. Will Redmond in our personnel office, J.R. Belton, Sherman, Jordan Arsenault. I mean, our personnel office, I thought, did a phenomenal job through the transition specifically where, the old staff was still here coaching a bowl game. There were only a couple of members of the new staff had arrived and were literally working out of the staff room so that we didn't infringe in anybody's space as those guys were trying to get ready for a game. And to be honest with you, that whole transition was odd because it was such a late game, and it could have been uncomfortable, but because there were so many good guys on the previous staff, and because Coach Kelly, myself, Coach Wilson, Kerry Cooks, the guys that got here fairly early, because we were so respectful of what was going on, it made the transition okay. But that could have been hairy with 7 or 8 coaches still in their offices, and we're in the staff room trying to bring in transfers and recruits, and it was a very odd transition. But I thought that we grinded it out and did a really good job. And to be honest with you, it's ongoing. I mean, we're not finished. We've got some scholarships left that we will probably use if we can find the right people here before we arrive at training camp. But there were so many different factors involved in evaluating guys. And I think we did a good job, but ultimately we'll find out in the fall.
I think people, when watching your team play or watching LSU play in that bowl game versus Kansas State, the first thing that people thought of, whether it was at halftime or the game went final, is who's going to be the quarterback? What's the quarterback position going to look like in the future? And the job that y'all have been able to do and to stack that room. You've got the number one quarterback in the country, Walker Howard, in that room from recruiting. You got Garrett Nussmeier in that room, who's going into a redshirt freshman season after some high times last year and playing as a true freshman. And then Miles Brennan's able to come back to LSU out of the transfer portal. And then you pull Jaden Daniels, which was probably the biggest get of the portal, or at least made the most news. I think all in all, you have to feel very comfortable or confident going into spring next week with what your quarterback room looks like compared to where it was when you guys took the job.
Well, what we feel is that between Coach Kelly, Joe Sloan, Mike Denbrock, that we've been able to create competition now and some depth, so that you're not out there with Jonte Kirkland, trying to run, zone read. I mean, God bless him and those guys, with what they tried to piece together there in bowl prep. I mean, that honestly, it wasn't fair. But we've been able to create depth in that room now. The four names that you mentioned, we believe, are all great human beings. They're all going to get significant reps here in the spring. Nobody has said, hey, this person is the guy. What we've been able to do is create some really healthy competition and some legitimate depth in the room with veterans and with two young guys that we have strong feelings about. And then we'll just go practice and those things will work themselves out with the offensive staff. But yeah, there's no doubt. And I think too, we were evaluating who was in the portal at one point, and Miles was sitting right there, and it was like, okay, we probably ought to put a phone call in and just check in with him and see how he's doing and what he's thinking about, and does he want to come in and have a conversation? And he and Coach Kelly got together and had a really, really good talk, and we were able to get in a situation where he decided to come back, and that really settled things down, and we were able to move forward from there.